Good afternoon. My name is David Callens, and I will be talking with you about dealing with grief. Of course, there are many different times in our lives that we will have to embrace or deal with grief in some form of the matter, whether it is grief in the loss of a friendship, grief in loss of a relationship, or actually grieving the loss of someone you love who has passed away. I'm pretty sure that anyone who will view this, who will review this video, you've had some kind or some type of loss in your life. And with that loss, you actually had to deal with a process of grieving. In many various cultures, grieving takes place differently. My study of the Jewish culture will show, even as we review scripture, how dealing with, let's start first of all with the death of a loved one. They hire mourners. That was part of their culture. That was part of their custom, that when a family member died, a friend died, you would hire mourners according to the stature of the person, how well known they were. Mourners were brought in and they were called professional mourners. And all they did was cry. Even when the individual's family members could not grieve properly, they brought in these professional mourners who would cry continuously until the period of mourning was over. Various cultures will, Muslim culture will, if a person passes away, they die, they immediately bury the body. There is no a long period of time of waiting. It is the person dies, they prepare the body, and it is buried. Indian cultures, as we see and we review, those Indian cultures sort of do the same, prepare the body after death, and in those, they do burn ceremonies to whereas they burn. Many different types of grief, many different ways to embrace death. But today I want to help us deal with some of the stages of how to deal with grief because we don't properly really know how to do it. I've come to find out in my own personal life just about a short 8 months ago, 9 months probably now, my grandmother, who practically helped raise me from the day that I was born until the day she breathed her last breath, passed 2 days after Christmas on last year. And it was a process of dealing with a woman that had been strong for 95 years, that at the latter months of her life battled dementia. And her mind, her brain became her enemy. And we had to go through that process of watching and preparing. And even in the midst of doing that, the time that when life expired, we were left with the matriarch of our family being gone and now just having boys, us really having to come together and deal with that loss. And even as a minister, even as a pastor for some years, I found myself being hit with the process of grief all over again. And I think it's important that we talk about that grief, not just in the death of a loved one, but even in divorce, separation, marriages that come to an end. You would be surprised that there's even a grieving process that if not properly handled, you will fall further into some types of depression. I've been there myself and went to a therapist who told me, she said, Mr. Callens, one thing I must inform you of, the fact that you were together this long, it is like losing a loved one. The ending of this relationship is like losing a loved one. So I want to talk with you very briefly about some of the stages of grief found here at WebMD. I've located this from various different sites, but WebMD published the 6 stages of grief. The first stage being denial. Because what happens is normally when we lose someone, when a relationship ends, we always ask the question or make the statement, this isn't happening. This can't be real. This, I'm going to wake up from this nightmare and life is going to be normal. But in the beginning, denial will be the first hurdle that you're going to have to cross. that if you really don't embrace that part of it, if you don't let your psyche develop that denial, and you try to play that off with another form of denial, then you will send yourself further down a rabbit hole. Second stage would be anger. That usually when we lose a loved one or we lose a relationship, anger tends to come out. That feeling that generates most of the time wrath, that if not coupled, will follow with action. So we will first deal with the denial that a relationship is ended. We will deal with the denial that our loved one is gone, but then we have to embrace that anger, because the truth of the matter is, no matter how perfect you think you are, you get angry too. Even if you're watching this, you've had those angry moments. The third would be bargaining. You always try to bargain with the situation. If only this would have happened. The scripture tells us in the Bible, Jesus has a friend by the name of Lazarus. And Lazarus' sister sends for him. When they send for him, Jesus takes 3 more days before he comes to see about the issue. And in that time, Lazarus dies. And the first thing that the sister says is, if you had only been here, Lazarus would not have died. We come to that bargaining stage where we say, if we had did this different, if we had only listened and took this option, if we had went to this doctor, if they had took better care of themselves, we always try to bargain with the ifs, the ands, and the buts. And so bargaining will always be a part of grief. Whether you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, your relationship has ended, or friendship has ended. One of the larger ones is going to be depression. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you that you will fall within depression very quickly. It's not going to take much, but you can find yourself, if you're sleeping, if you don't want to be bothered, you want to stay in dark rooms, that is usually the sign of early depression. After my grandfather died some 26, 27 years ago, the day after my 18th birthday, I didn't know anything about depression. We never heard anyone talking about depression, especially at that young age. But with me not having people an outlet to talk to about really how I was feeling inside of losing my best friend, I dealt with that for years and wondered why I was experiencing some of the things that I was experiencing. It was because I had developed a form of depression that had triggers, that if those triggers were not treated, the depression began to become unbearable. So listen, if you're dealing with the loss of someone, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a friendship, you need to be able to pinpoint what you're dealing with when you're going through denial, when you have anger, when you try to use bargaining, but then that depression starts to come in. You feel overwhelmed. You want to cry often. You want to sleep a lot. You want to stay inside to yourself. Those are early signs of depression. And then finally, acceptance. Listen, we have to accept that the person is gone, the relationship is over, and the friendship is broken. May never be repaired. Person may never come back. They may never be healed. When the lid to the coffin closes and they're lowered to the ground, that's it. And we have to accept that that person's life has ended as we know it in the physical form, in the physical realm, and we cannot die there with them, but we must continue to go on and live our lives. So I am a big proponent of making sure that when we are faced with turmoil, when we're faced with difficulty, that we go through the proper stages. We embrace the stages of grief, because if we do that, we will find ourselves learning how to grieve better, process it better, but come out better on the other side of it. Thank you.